How you doing?
Doing well.
What's the topic tonight?
Topic tonight is balancing internal and external reality. How's that sound?
Sounds like a good topic.
Yeah. What is it? Just curious. Like, what does it bring to mind even to like have a topic like that? What is it like? Does it conjure up any images or thoughts?
I don't know. It makes me think about that internal fight that we were continuing talking about yesterday. That maybe everybody's a little angry at something, and if it's not reality, you know what I'm saying? Maybe that's just something that's internal. You know,
Yeah. 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 In terms of like just maybe I'm seeing it right, maybe I'm not.
I'm telling you, I took some of the approach to this. It's like steps and logic over here today. I was gonna go drop my boat in the marina.
Mhm.
Yuan is like, that's not an essential thing to be doing. And at first I was gonna blow up. Like, what do you mean? Just leave me alone. I'm
Yeah.
gonna go drop this thing in the water. Don't worry about it. But then I felt like you. I'm like,
Mhm. Yep.
maybe she's not wrong.
Yeah. I know. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe
And
it's listen.
yeah,
Yeah.
dodge the whole big thing for what I'm saying, something that's meaningless.
Yeah, right. You find out what someone else is seeing or saying and seeing and
So it's a good state of mind. I like to practice. Like shamans have to discipline themselves to think like this. I think that's what you're on to over here. This is
yeah,
it's a lifelong discipline to just think.
yeah. Uh, we haven't been taught how to think particularly well. I don't know that I've ever had any curriculum that's even taught me how to think, despite having gone through a whole bunch of curriculums on things that you think have to do with thinking, like the law. Wasn't wasn't anything I encountered about thoughts you use to go about your business and your relationships 101. Never a class like that until I met Elise down there on the screen and Vanessa and John in the background here somewhere.
So who'd you meet first? Elise at a float, and
Yeah,
then she turned you on to the Office of Shaman.
yeah. Elise had a float tank in the basement of her house in Chester.
That's she's
And
close. She's
she's
around.
close.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, back in 2000 and maybe it was 2010 or 11, there weren't float centers in New Jersey for me to go to.
So you found Elise.
I found her. Yeah.
What about John? How'd you encounter him?
I got a book from Elise and short at some point after I started floating and I read it and I was in. It's like, yeah, yeah, baby. Tell me more. Um,
So then, Ken, did you just take the intro class from there? Is that what you did?
Intro class.
yeah, I took the intro class. I took Introduction to the Art of Rewriting,
Did.
which back then, Paul, wasn't a online kind of thing. Elise had teamed up with someone in Brooklyn, and I drove down to an apartment in Brooklyn and
Oh,
took the class over a weekend, sometime 2011.
oh
I
wow. Okay.
recall.
Yeah. Mhm.
Then I did at some point after, probably not too long after, started a rewrite, and that's when I met John. But even back then, we
Ah,
weren't using the technology that we use now. Like now, we have a platform called Slack, and it's really fast back and forth, and it organizes. Back then, it was email.
yeah, right, right.
But why'd you like? You reached out to John because of his book. It was like,
Yeah, pretty much. There were, yeah, it wasn't. It was like if you wanted to do a rewrite, you had to reach out and ask to have one done. So we did that.
Alicia and Terry, you're the appropriate people to tell that story.
Yeah.
Well, when I was first met John, the book was just in its manuscript stage. It hadn't even gotten into a book form yet. It was still being reviewed and worked on to get it to book form. And I met John's ex-brother-in-law in a class that I was taking, and that led to me. He was editing John's book, and that led to the book coming into my hands, and it worked me. I did not know what was going on particularly, but I knew that this book had something that was changing things or changing my thinking or working on my thinking in a way that wasn't logical. It wasn't something that I could quite put my finger on. And from there, we didn't even have intro classes when I started out. I went right into rewrite from there. And after that, my husband and the time and I put the tank in my basement. I had no idea what I was getting myself into or what to do, but I had a way of forging ahead, maybe not with the best, maybe not listening to external reality very well. But I put the tank in my basement and I had people come float, and Ken came to float from there. And then he went into the intro class that a young fellow and I did in Brooklyn, and that brought him along the way. So there was lots of stages, and well, like at the beginning of anything, it's kind of trial and error until you get all the people on board and get it right. I don't know if Terry would have more to say. She was there in the beginning too, when we first started to go down to Mexico to classes as well. She was in the very first classes with me. Are you there?
Yeah, I am.
Anything
Yeah.
to fill in here with?
No, I mean, it was very similar to me. I knew somebody who had the manuscript, and I was actually doing a lot of my own reading, and got intrigued, and so sought out doing the rewrite. You know, at that point, John was the only one that was doing them that I knew of. And from there, we did. You and I were in the first harmony class down in Mexico,
Where?
which was the first of the Mexico classes.
And that's where John is now. John's place is it was really nice. It was you know what I'm saying? Like, I was impressed.
It's gorgeous, yes.
Yeah, it's an amazing facility for seminars.
And like John's background, how is he, like, is he an author and then he wrote Book of Shaman, or is, like, what's his background?
Well,
I think we're gonna have to ask him.
ask him
If he's-
directly.
I
can
don't
hear
see who's on over here.
Yeah, I know you don't. Yeah, but let's. Is he still on? Actually, oh yeah, he is.
Yeah, he's still on.
There he be.
Let me see here. Hi, Ralph. How are you?
Good, John. How you doing?
I'm wonderful.
You know, it's funny, like, as you get to know people more, you know what I mean? Like, yesterday showing your house, it was like, you know what? It's hard to imagine what you are and what you're living. And then when you showed where you are, it's like, that's it. It's a whole different, you know, vision now.
Yeah. Well, Ralph, I started out life in Pennsylvania. Okay, not much there. At the beginning, my dad was he met my mom at Newport News. She was a cashier, and he visited the PX or the dance that they held or something of that nature, and they met, and voila. It wasn't a good thing that they met, and because she was from the South and he wasn't. He was from where I grew up in Pennsylvania. And she thought that the world really had to be defined by Southern Baptist types of definitions. And he thought that methodology and Methodism and that kind of thing, where it was just about as much as of religion as he could deal with, because he had to go milk twice a day, you know. And that meant you worked a lot too, if you had those cows that you had to feed. And it was just him and my granddad. And my granddad,
What year is this?
oh, Jesus, this would be 58, 50, starting about 54, 50, 53, 54, up through 63, something like that.
Okay.
Okay. But my mom was not happy with being in Pennsylvania. I mean, Christ, there's nothing there. If you ever get over to Muncie Valley, you ought to drive by. It's the same now as it was then, and you can't imagine living there, because then there wasn't television, and I mean, we got radio, but the Grand Ole Opry came in on Tuesday, and so in the morning, of course, you had to get up. But the cows didn't mind, because you had to play something for them to listen to, and you might as well listen to it too. And so that's kind of how life was for me at that time. And so, but the thing is that I had to learn to be a pretty practical fellow working there on that farm, because my grandfather had built that farm. I mean, he had wrestled it out of the side of the mountain and built the house and all that kind of stuff when he was a young man. And he raised 7 kids there. So he was something, or 9 kids there, excuse me. He was something, he was. And, well, my mother, she was longing for something from the South besides Southern Fried Chicken, and she found a church named Rock Run Baptist Church, which was serviced by some people from New Tribes Bible Institute. And so New Tribes, they went out and they talked to people like in Papua New Guinea, and I mean, I knew the families of those missionaries that died down in Ecuador, both before and after they went back, and that kind of stuff. I knew guys that were just put one of my eventual teachers had done 10 years of translation in the highlands of Papua New Guinea, and he had translated the New Testament into 10 native languages over those 10 years, which was quite a feat by anybody's imagination or reckoning. He taught me hermeneutics, and so I had to learn it the way he saw it, and he used it in a very practical way, you see.
And what is that? Hermeneutics.
Hermeneutics, yeah. It's a study of language that we're not going to spend time on tonight. I'd be glad to talk with you about it, but it takes about 4 hours, and you don't want me to spend 4 hours telling you about this, Ralph. Not tonight. I don't mind telling you, and it's like the cassette is interactive, so it's fun. But you didn't ask me that. What you asked me really was where did I come from? Well, I ended up going to any mission fields because, well, I'll be honest with you, Ralph. I discovered that there was pussy and titties. Okay, and you know.
At least you're honest.
And so I ended up going down. I ended up working down in North Carolina at NC State, where I went to school. After that, and I ended up, I got a job out of there because I worked on the grounds maintenance crew there, and so I got a job after that in Phoenix, working for a company where we had 4,700 doors, and I did the landscape maintenance on all of those properties, and what we did is we sold and resold properties. I was the only managerial rank guy that didn't wear a suit. I wore shorts and jungle shirts. But Bill loved my ass because I made him money. Anyway, that's neither here nor I actually didn't cost him money. But that's neither here nor there, because one day I got invited to go over to listen to this fellow talk about what he was talking about was Silva mind control. And so when I listened to what they talked about, I understood it, but they weren't talking about the way I understood it. I hadn't learned it in terms in the same terminology that they were talking about. I had learned it in terms of what it said in Romans and Corinthians and Deuteronomy and so forth. But I understood what they were saying and the concepts that they were talking about, but it was ordered differently. And I thought, well, that was a very interesting concept that what they did. And so I went and talked with the guy about it and started to listen carefully. And they started putting me to talk with other guys that they knew. Which they all turned out to be kind of, well, they turned out to be a lot smarter than they looked on the outside, which people are a lot, you know. But anyway, what happened was that there was 4 of them. There was Howard, and there was Glenn, and there was Eugene, and there was Doc. And so I got to know all of those guys. And I learned stuff from them that you don't learn anywhere else, that kind of like the stuff that Ken's talking about. And so it turned and twisted and went around and around and around in my head. And so I started teaching Silva mind control classes, which was awful. And then eventually I ended up in Boulder. I opened up the first tanks that was open to the public, which was a real education, I got to tell you. And it took years for all that to settle through. I mean, Ralph, I won't tell you how ugly it was, but it was ugly because I wasn't prepared to deal with that. I mean, I was prepared, and I pushed these guys really hard to listen to stuff and so forth, but there wasn't a me to push anybody that had made all the mistakes that I made, that I could tell other people, don't do that. Stop. That's dangerous. And even with that, they don't believe me just a lot of times, you know. So, but it's fair enough. I didn't believe anybody either. So anyway, what happened was one day my sister got into trouble. Again, she was kiting checks really again, and so I went and I bailed her out, kind of organized her business and got her bunches of sales for Christmas and so forth. But she was hanging out with this guy named Paul Bowersox. He's a nice guy, crazy as a loon. But the thing is he was a football player, and football players get hit in the head a lot, especially if you're a big old boy and you're right up on the line, which is where he was. And so every play he got smacked in the head, so sometimes from various directions. And even though he's a real smart guy and everything, some of the lights had been knocked out. That's all I can tell you. There were just areas that didn't light up right. That you could shine a flashlight on him and he'd say, yep, there it is. But you turn the flashlight off, it disappeared. And that's what happened with Paul. He's a nice guy, though. Anyway, he edited the book, and at that part, he had a good flashlight. And, I mean, he could argue and tell me and say, this has got to be said this way, and he was right. He did it right. The only thing is he wanted me to make it twice as long, and I didn't want to do the work. I just said no, and just stopped right there. And I said, if anybody wants to know, they can ask me. And so enter Elise and Terry and so on and so forth. They came and they asked me, and so I told them. I said,
and when did you write the book? 2004?
Oh Christ, I don't know. Somewhere 2000 something maybe. It was in my head for longer than that, so it's really hard for me to tell you when I wrote it, because when I wrote it, I just said I was baking bread, and so I would bake bread, and in between baking the bread, you got to sit around and do something. So I sat down. I just wrote this book out. It was in my head. It took like 3 months, even with the editing and everything, to write that.
What about your education? You college educated?
Well, yeah, I'm college educated, but what I learned in college ain't worth a damn. It don't make any difference anyway. What I actually learned in life, I had to learn in other places and other ways. I mean, without the college education, I couldn't have got there. But that's not what I'm talking about here. And I don't have a degree in what it is I'm talking about. I can just do it. But you can see that or not. It doesn't make any difference to me. If you like it, great. If you don't, well, that's great too.
How'd you end up in Mexico? Like, it's like you're in a palace right now.
Yeah, I like Mexico. Well, to tell you the truth, my mother-in-law was sick. and she wouldn't die. It took her 2 years, and by that time I had a nice business running in Mexico. And besides, it was easier. It was easier to live in Mexico. I mean, I used to live in LA, baby, and I ran all over LA, and I was on the freeway all the damn time, and it's like that's crazy making. I don't have to do that in Mexico. I can relax and enjoy myself here, and I live well in a pretty nice house, but it would be nicer if people came to visit me. And I think that Ken's going to explain some of that to you here as the next part of the story. I think that speaking of internal and external realities here.
Yeah. Cool. You got your answer, Ralph?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, like there's no playbook. Like you had asked me one of the early conversations we had about like what the business is about, and I was like, I'm making it up. It's true. Yeah. That was not John's there, I'm here. What he does is different than what the rest of us on this call do. So I found myself a lot of times like, oh, what the hell? Where's the business here, really? What is it? Is there a business? What? I mean, I just knew the value. I knew that I was onto something. I was so intrigued and motivated to uncover more about, almost like peeling back things I thought I saw about the world only to get more clarity, right? Because I mean, that's a big part of this, right? And like you had made reference to it before. It's like, if I could hear what Maria says, then I can hear what other people are saying, and I can train myself to do that. I've got a lot better clarity in terms of what's going on. And if I've got more clarity about what's going on, then I've got a lot of places to maneuver. Or at least things to consider that I hadn't considered before. Okay. External and internal reality, it presented to me kind of like a really curious concept. First is like, wait a second, what does that even mean? Is there really an internal reality and an external reality? Are those really different? It's not an intuitive thing. It's not like I ever, before I met John or Elise, stopped myself in my tracks and said, wow, maybe what I'm seeing is not really what's going on. Maybe I'm just interpreting what I'm seeing. I never did that. I think I'm like everybody else. It's like what I saw, God's honest truth. That's what's happening. I got it pegged. I know what you're doing. I know what you're saying. I can see where you're coming from. I know your angle, and on, right? Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, like then I think like the first glimpses probably for everyone on that are facilitator types, Terry and Vanessa and Elise and Paul you heard from, and there are some others probably on the call here. The first glimpses were of my own thinking. Like I did an intro class with Elise and this other guy in Brooklyn. And like the class was real, like one of the things that just hit me in the class was that they saw things about me that I didn't see about me. Just think about that. Like how kind of fucked up does that sound? With a whole bunch of people that hadn't met me before, they see things about me that I can't see.
Why Brooklyn? If that's where the class was, that's where you're from?
Yeah, that's where it was.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Elise.
At the apartment we had the class in.
Yeah.
For any particular reason, it's just how it happened.
Yeah.
So you didn't mind traveling from Bridgewater to Brooklyn for 2 days, or you stay there?
I just went. I drove in the morning, got there by 10 a.m. and left by 4 p.m. and did the same thing again the next day. I didn't mind one bit. But it was challenging. Like it wasn't, when I was there, it wasn't always like wow, this is, awesome, because for me, I don't know that this is a feature for everybody. It does seem to be for one degree or another. Peeling back and looking at the things I did was not always like, freaking A, yeah! It wasn't always those kind of moments. It was often like, yeah, it doesn't kind of feel right, as beads of sweat would roll down my forehead.
I don't always remember a lot of things, but I actually remember your goal.
Yep.
The goal was you wanted to remember the names of people when you were introduced to them.
All right, hold the thought for a second because I want to build this for Ralph. Ralph, in the intro class, we lay down a foundation first, like this even internal and external reality and blame and dichotomies and things like that, which we're covering now. So essentially what we've been doing in the last few days is laying the foundation we lay for the intro class. But at some point, we have people write a practice neural program. Except practice is not quite the best word for it. It's an okay word for it because it's actually gets into your shit. So it's hard to say something's practice if it gets into your shit. And I sat down there with Elise and she said, all right, what's your goal for this practice program? And what did I say, Elise?
You wanted to remember the names of people when you were introduced to them.
Yeah, I was having a problem with that in my life.
That's hilarious. I'm guessing that's
All the people
what you
in the
just
room
said.
Wait, go on, Elise.
All the people in the room are saying, Ken? How is it you're so important you can't remember the names of the people you It did go on from there. It wasn't, it really, the whole class could see it. And I think that was quite educational for our Kenneth.
Oh, there's more people in the class. It's not just you three people.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Oh, no. Yeah, there were more people.
6 people in that class.
Yep. Yeah. People just like me or without any background in this kind of work.
So that was your bullshit answer.
Well, it was a goal, but quickly it was exposed. I picked it as a bullshit goal. I know that because I was all about bullshit. I don't even think I did put much thought into it. It was just something. It satisfied the criteria of goal.
Isn't the Ken that you see now? He was the Ken then. You have to understand that there's been improvement since then.
It's definitely different. So, but I think then as I went through the class with the people there and was introduced to them 4 or 5 times, that's Joe, that's Sally, that's Bob, that's Jane. I then proceeded to, even though I had picked the goal to remember their names, I forgot all their names throughout the whole class. So, but that's right. So practice program, but what the fuck's that about? What was that really about for me? Where was I not, just a real curiosity.
Excuse me. It was a really good example of the internal reality not matching the external.
Yep.
There were people sitting in that room with you.
Yeah. Yeah. And in one sense, the training that I've received through the various workshops that we do has had that flavor throughout. It's not like it's all about that, but as I have revealed to myself more ability to kind of see what's going on, I've had to re-examine the way I think about things, because the way you think about things is the way you're going to see things and interpret things.
Yeah.
From a pure science perspective, it makes a lot of sense, and I always nodded my head because I read all the books and I've got some, I like that shit, and I found it fascinating. Science, says that our interpretations of what we see are not only unreliable, they're inherently unreliable. You're wait, stop, time out. How can this possibly be? I mean, just think about that. Really? Really? Our perceptions are inherently unreliable? Well, what are these two fucking things in the middle of my head here called eyes? How can they be inherently unreliable? How can my interpretations be? Terry put up a chart here. Well, you know, you got the external world reality out there. Can you see it, Ralph? You're on with your phone.
Yeah, I'm zooming in.
Okay. So you've got that external world happening out there, but it's still being perceived through your senses. I mean, literally nothing more than electrical inputs. That's it. And what are those inputs? Or rather, how does it get processed? It gets processed through your thinking. It's like all the shit inside the thoughts in your head, those accumulation of memories.
Well, it's more complicated than you're thinking. That's too simplistic for a meaningful explanation for Ralph.
Okay, go. Yeah. Fill in some more then, John, could you?
Yeah, Ralph. Here's the thing: is that there are two visual inputs into the brain. For instance, there is one that goes directly into the back of the brain where the visual cortex is, and the other goes down into the area below the medulla oblongata, but down below the hippocampus. There's a big ball of nerve endings that lives there, just at the top of the spinal column, where an older set of visual inputs go into the brain. And those visual inputs are connected to where we are in space in the top of the brain. Now, if you lose a side of the visual input into your visual cortex, you can still be able to notice motion if the other part of that visual input is not damaged. And the way to think about that is to think about it in terms of it being of thinking about how a lizard is. A lizard's got one eye looking over there to the east and one eye looking over to like 9:30 o'clock, and there's a fly with, kind of off to the right and up above eye level going, and that lizard goes, and it's gone, baby. The fly is now lunch. Now, we have that same ability still. And when we see things, it's because of how we perceive energy there too. It's not just our description, but it is how we perceive things, not how we describe it. However, our descriptions, and our perceptions are very, very, very closely unrelated, it would appear. I'm sorry.
You said our descriptions, what we perceive and how we describe them, are closely related.
Oh yeah, they are.
Yeah.
They're in the same ballpark.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, our perceptions and how we describe them. But just because we're receiving inputs doesn't mean that by the time it becomes a description of what we think we see, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's an accuracy of balance between what was coming in and how we describe what we perceived, right?
No, there never was one for me, at least. I mean,
No.
that may exist for people, but I can't swear to it. I mean, I could lie, and
Yeah.
that never works out well for me. I probably should, but I just don't anymore. So.
Yeah, I have a question, John. This is it occurred today. I was thinking some, because, well, what the hell are you going to do when you're home all day, about Korzybski.
Oh, yeah. Interesting dude, Korzybski.
Interesting dude. And one of the things that he's known for is the concept that the map is not the territory, right? Which everybody, you know that. Of course, it's like it's a freaking map. It's not the territory.
Right.
And so, but it occurred to me that there's a lot more depth to that thought, because my whole perceptual mechanisms in my thinking are essentially a map. Would you say?
Yes, yes. That does appear to be true. Yes.
And so, understanding that the map is not the territory, the internal reality is not the external reality.
Right.
If you're going to get from point A to point B, I understand having a reliable, accurate map is going to help you with getting to your goal.
Well, unless you've got Siri to talk to you pretty well.
Yeah, we got to crush him.
Yeah, but we cheat these days. So okay.
Yeah.
Maps are important. Maps, no doubt, they're important. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what about? Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Ralph. Yes.
I say, what about your map? Because we left off intro class. So now you're trying to learn people's names.
Yeah.
But really, what's going on, and then what are the next steps?
Good. Yeah. Have you gotten a copy of? Did I give you a copy of John's book?
No.
I'm gonna give it to you. I'm gonna go. I'll have the floats. I'm just gonna leave it at your front door. Okay.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Unless you like reading it on like a Kindle kind of thing, in which case you can just download it from Amazon. Okay. The book is broken down into tools, and they have an order to them. Like the first thing that the book talks about is the tool of programming, the rewrite or intro to rewrite, or another workshop that we do called Program Theory and Application, are part of a 3-part series about programming. It's about like, how do you learn about your own programming? How do you know about your own programming if you're not doing that peeling back part? Well, for me, sweat beads coming down my forehead, revealing to me that I ain't what I thought I was. And not only that revelation, but then an adjustment in the rewrite, because the rewrite does a much deeper dive than the intro class. And it always starts with the same thing. The rewrite always starts with the rewriter being asked to write a story about your earliest childhood memories. What do you remember? Well, I remember for me, it's like, and I think I told like one of these stories a few nights ago. I remember 2 or 3 years old, I'm in the kitchen and my mom's second husband asked me a question and I answered it and I was really proud. And like, why did I remember that? And I have a whole bunch of those things. They were significant because they're still things I can pull out and remember, even if only in kind of a tidbitty, not complete memory way, because they had a significance to me. They became like launch point, ground zero for what we have called in earlier episodes beliefs in real, or what John Lilly called self-meta programs, or what you could think about as your operating system if you want. So in the rewrite, we go in, take a deep dive down into the operating system, find an early childhood memory that is the starting point of some program, belief in real, and then adjust it. Adjust it how? Because I can guarantee you that for everybody that goes through this rewrite, Ralph, they have a handful of early childhood memories that they put a spin on it, or a color or a flavor or a hue on it that's not particularly mature like, right? Because if you think about me as a 2 or 3-year-old marching into the kitchen and answering a question right, what I interpreted from that is not necessarily what was going on. And I put immature or childlike interpretation on it, but yet that still becomes part of my code, my operating system code through which I see the world. Make sense so far?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. But just like then in the intro class, in the rewrite, we utilize the same facets, the same steps of writing a program, breaking it down into steps so that I can see the parts of it and fill it in with more adult-like parts. And so that's essentially how programming got done in the first place. You're just being deliberate about it. It's like I tell people, the tool of programming is not learning a new skill. I mean, not in the sense of programming. You're a freaking programming machine, Ralph. Me too. We've written programs our whole life. Being deliberate about it, that's a skill. Well, so from there, once you got some experience in programming, you can deal with getting along better with people, right? Because you got to do the first with the second, right? You know what I mean? Like, how are you going to get along with Iona if you have this funky interpretation about what she's doing? She never lets me do, what's that bar that used to, it's still there. It's on Route 22. I forget. Yeah, whatever. But I remember earlier in the year, I was there at some event, and there was some guy from some like networking event that was at the bar was like telling his partner, I think he was in an accounting firm, how he's at this bar every night, literally. And even though it was like a networking event, and he had made a comment that something like, quote, his old lady doesn't understand him. He said, she never lets me do what I want to do, he said to his buddies. Meanwhile, he's at this bar every single night. Okay? How are you going to get along with your old lady if that's the way you think about things? So programming is a really useful tool to come first before you can do the second tool, which is which we call moving assemblage point, which you could loosely translate into adopting other points of view. Right? Like, what was Iona saying today when you said, I want to dump my boat in the water? Like you could have heard, she doesn't let me do what I want to do, or you could actually hear what she's saying. What she's saying, right? So that second tool, which we call moving assemblage point, or loosely changing point of views, has its own class or workshop, which we call harmony. So we got the programming first, and then we got the harmony, and then we got some even after that because when you get into the Office of Shaman, you'll see there are tools that lead all the way up to agreement. Why agreement, you ask? Or did you ask?
Well, I'll ask now.
Why? Well, if shit's going to get done, whatever it is, whatever happens, whatever turns up in your life is going to be a reflection or a result of the agreements that you hold. It's not a conscious thing. Not at all. It's not like me as a lawyer. When I first got into this work, I'm like, I will agree with you that if you do this, I'll do that. All of the agreements in terms of the reality that was showing up in my life were not those kinds of like, let's put pen to paper and we'll have it typed up and we'll dot all the I's and cross the T's and we'll both sign it. We have an agreement. No. It's like I got a chance to look at the agreements I hold with my mom, with my brother, with Maria, with my law partners, and that's an important thing. So this whole curriculum works toward agreement. If you're, if you pick agreements, that's why we said like the mission is to turn disagreement into agreement. That's our mission of this whole series that we're doing here. In fact, dude, that's the mission of quantum floats even. That's essentially what we're doing there. We're showing people that they can be deliberate about picking agreements. And if they do that, what shows up in their life is going to be, well, probably more to their liking than the stuff that's showing up right now.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. Yep. It's like, I watch you like when we walk through your banquet hall or even like the restaurants, how you deal with people. I know a couple of times you've introduced me, I think it's both at the Bedminster location of Delicious Heights and at the Manor, the Bridgewater Manor, the banquet hall, you've introduced me to like your manager person. Both locations, and you told me about like how you trust them and stuff, and you guys can talk about anything, and you've got a good relationship with them, and you respect them, and they respect you, and they get the job done, right? You don't have to be there on top of them all day long. Okay, right?
Yeah.
Well, those are agreements, That's a function of how you do agreements. We all do them. Everything we got in our life is a reflection of that. I meet lawyers a lot that say, can't get anybody to work for me. There are no good people out there. If you want something done, you got to get it done yourself. You can't trust people. If you trust people, then they're going to take advantage of you. Okay? That's programming talking to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
You think the nature of the agreements that they hold with people are influenced by that kind of programming? Can't trust people. If you want to get it done, you got to do it yourself. Really?
Ralph, do you understand what he's saying about what agreements you hold with people?
Say it again. Sorry.
I said, do you understand what he means about the agreements that you hold with people?
I mean, if you can expand more on it, I'd listen.
Okay, so for instance, like in my case, like we have this thing, like my mom and her kids, we have this thing that we can't tell my dad, right? And it's everything like we can't tell my dad. So that's an agreement that we hold. Well, we used to, like I don't do that anymore, but there was this thing since a very, very young age that my mom would tell us, let's go do this, but you can't tell your dad. I have this, don't tell your dad. And she never wanted us to tell my dad. And then she'd get mad at us because we didn't want to tell her, right? And so now I look at my sister and she does exactly the same thing with her boyfriend. She'll be like, I did this thing, but I'm not going to tell Jorge. And you're like, well, why wouldn't you tell him? Like, the agreement of the girls can't say what is really on our minds. That was an agreement that I held with my mom. Do you see that?
And then why does it spill over into other life?
Well, the same thing that I would do with my mom. I apply it for everybody, right?
Well, no, there's a better explanation that he deserves to hear.
Okay.
Okay, it's the way it's calculated, Ralph, is that it's not excitation. It's called once a program is written, it becomes the rule of our life until it is recognized and changed. And so what we all do is we pick agreements. We say this, we agree to say use instead of you people. or we agree to say, damn, or we agree to say, have a nice day, or some other asinine, stupid namaste kind of thing that we all agree to say. Now, that identifies us, and it's our secret handshake to tell everybody who we are. And so all of us who say namaste, I'm not one thing. I do say namaste, but it's always in a derisive way. Namaste yourself. But those people who say namaste like that are going to find that it's difficult for them to live in any other reality or even be recognized in any other reality, simply because they don't speak that other reality's language. They can only agree inside of that thing. That's what's known for them. So they agree with that they know that. Oh, okay, that's cool. They know that. If they live like that, I'm happy with it. If they say they know it and they don't live that way, I'm kind of like Taj Mahal.
Yeah.
And then how does the rewrite go on something like that? Discipline of constantly reminding yourself, that's not something your brain is supposed to do?
No. You don't ever do that. That would be that would be a kind of like the antithesis of what it is that you really would like to accomplish, right? So why would you do something like that to yourself? I mean, that doesn't make any sense, dude. No, what you have to think about, and what you have to actually put on and wear, is you have to say, okay, look, I personally am an alive individual, and I can decide to live life because I'm an individual who's alive. And in that act of living life, I think, by golly, is that maybe it's just possible that what I can do is that I can take control of what it is I'm doing in my life, so that other people can also see how I'm doing it, and then they can do that same thing if they would like. That'd be fun. But that happens every now and then, Ralph. It does. I have to admit, it does occasionally, and it's always quite rewarding when it does as well.
Okay. You good, Ralph?
Yeah, I do.
Maria and I grew up with some similar programming. I think for her, she grew up with a protective household, and they wanted to make sure she was safe, and that's a big part of Filipino culture. Make sure the kids are safe. And women get treated differently than boys. Girls in the Filipino culture, her boys, had a certain amount of freedom that she didn't have. I think for her, there was a like, I'm gonna do it anyway. I'm just gonna do it. I'll do it. Don't ask for permission beforehand. Just do it. Maybe you'll get caught. Maybe you won't. Which is not really too different than programming that I came out of childhood with, which was something of the flavor of like, yeah, I can do whatever I want. Let me tell you how. Well, the nature, like when I first met Maria, we didn't sit down, spill this all out, and say, all right, so you're not going to ask me about my shit, and I won't ask you about your shit. We'll both kind of like, you do what you want, I'll do it. There was like none of that, right? I mean, that would never happen, right? Just wouldn't. Right? Makes sense, Ralph.
Mm-hmm.
But yet, the way we behaved in our relationships, those agreements, or for us, like, you don't ask me about what you're doing, I want to ask you about what you're doing, were very much in play. And the reality, you just have to, just consider what it would be like if you were married to a person who went and bought a float center and did other things without really seeking your agreement on that.
Yeah, that's
You
rough.
really, yeah, it wouldn't be cool. Yeah, yeah. But then I saw how the programming then was like, motherfucker, don't ask me what I'm going to do, you know, and that was like from like how I would approach like Maria and my law partners when they asked me, dude, what are you doing here? Just yeah, how fucked up that sounds, Ralph, really, but that was really all they were doing, knocking on the door. Kaplan, Earth to Kaplan, what are you doing? So, well, what showed up was a reflection of the thoughts that I use to go about doing things.
How do you feel now? You're like, I feel like you're in the journey.
Yeah.
And you're through a good portion of it. You're not at the beginning. There's never an end, I would imagine. Yeah. Like, how's the feeling now?
Well, it's a lot. It's the stress level and the frustration is way the fuck less, just way less. Because all of the anger that comes along with how dare you ask me what I'm going to do is like replaced with, of course people want to know what I do and I want to know what they do. And if I'm going to enjoy relationships with people, I want them to see what I do, to know what I do. I want to get background, backup, and information from them so they can give me some insights into how what I do looks to them so I can learn better. Dude, that's a whole different way of going about things. Not only do I get to work better with people, but I enjoy them better because the whole flavor of don't ask me what I'm doing, motherfucker, or how dare you question me that's all gone. Now it's just like, yeah, thanks, thanks for that, or how do you think about this? And so I think I'm less stressed. I'm closer with people. I allow people much closer in, and I'm not, frankly, I don't give a rat's ass about what I've been through. I'll share it with people. There's stuff that, I mean, what I used to consider my quote private life is now it's like my story.
Yeah.
So Ralph, don't let him fool you. It did take him a while. I mean, he went to see John how many times in a year, Ken?
1 year, I think I visited him like 8 times. Maybe not 8, maybe 4.
Where, in Mexico?
Yeah.
Oh.
Hey,
yeah.
Ken.
Yeah.
This probably represents you rewriting quite a number of beliefs in real, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But I don't think it was only rewriting, Paul. I think that it was going to harmony class too, right, Ken? And you're in the
Yeah.
dot and tank operators.
Yep. You'll
Every
see.
time you go to functions?
Yep. All of the classes deal with the tools. Not all of them. Not all the tools in every class. Like the first 3 classes. Here's a slide that Terry did. Can you see it, Ralph?
Yeah.
So you'd always ask about the floating, and then people will do like the green on the bottom, the those 3-part programming series, the intro class, the art of rewriting, and then program theory and application. Those are colored green because they're programming classes. But then some people want like a business plan done. And so if you look above, there's this thing called MBO, which is just Peter Drucker management by objective, which is, loosely you can think of as a business plan, except not the kind of bullshit ones that lawyers write. It's really a business plan of getting along with your team. So people sometimes will go from floating and do an MBO, but you'll see like a green arrow from the programming series also goes up there. There's like 2 arrows that point up there. So you could do the programming series and then do an MBO, which I personally think is helpful because it's good to have a background in programming if you're going to deal with the thoughts in your business. There's another one up top called Reality Creation Through the Dyad, which is like for couples that could be business couples or significant other couples. That workshop takes place in Mexico over a period of 8 days. And during that 8 days, the couple examines the reality that gets created in a relationship and whether it's to their liking and they get an opportunity to write like a plan to move in a different direction if they want. Okay. And then you can see we've got all the way on the right side 3 more workshops that happen in Mexico. One's like business operators, sometimes called tank operators, and then there's harmony, and then there's functions. I think when you read John's book, this'll make more sense.
It got me interested. I'm going to start reading that thing.
Okay. Well, I'll drop it off tomorrow. Okay.
Good.
What's up, John? You back on?
Well, I can be.
Well, I see your face. So.
You want to see my face? Okay.
You got pinned. No, I see a man in a hat, and I know that's you. And I guess, and now I see the man without the hat.
Yeah, well, it's the same one. Surprising.
What do you got something to add to what I said or to Ralph's question?
Not really. I think Ralph's questions though are probably as good as it's going to get for you in terms of where it is that you need to go here with some of this, Ken.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that you need to. I think you need to keep on just answering those questions as far as you can.
Yeah, for sure.
So anyway,
it's good. Helpful to me.
The thing is this is that you know what you're doing or what you're trying to accomplish and so forth here is fairly hard to accomplish because there's a lot of data that you have to sort through and think about and it's like you have to order how you think about things as though you're actually running a computer, because what you believe is real really does function like an operating system in your mind, not what you believe about Jesus or the Virgin Mary or whether you have another beer or whether you're a Republican or Democrat or whether Trump has water wings or just regular wings. It doesn't make any difference what you believe. You know, what about those things. What you believe is real, however, that affects everything that you do. Everything. And most of what you believe is real was probably put there non-verbally. In fact, probably lots of it was put there non-verbally. Maybe not most of it. Maybe more than 50%. A lot of it's put there verbally too, because mom said so, or because dad said so, or because in Ralph's family, this is how we do things. You know, whatever that story was for you and for your folks.
Yeah.
So there's lots and lots of questions, and Ralph, if you know, anytime that you'd like to continue on with the conversation, just let Ken know, we can continue on. We put you on the screen and we can visit about it. Okay.
Yeah, we do these Zoom calls frequently. You know.
Zoom calls.
Yeah.
You got me definitely thinking about early memory. You know what I mean? Like that's as you guys are talking, it's like, you know, I'm thinking that too. I'm gonna dissect some of this when we're done with the conversation.
Yeah, the thing is that, you know, it's just crazy stuff that we remember, right? But we were kids, right? We did what did we know about what was going on? You know, what 3-year-old can drive, for instance? You know, what 3-year-old knows whether or not he's mom's holding out on dad because dad went out drinking with the boys, I don't know, a month ago, last December. Who cares about that really when you're that age? You can't really care about it. Whatever is that happening is what you're absorbing. And it's like, it's all normal to you at that age because that's how it feels. But some of those things come back and kick us in the butt and bite us over the course of time. And we usually remember those things. We say, I remember that thing. Even for somebody that repressed the memory like Elise, what happens is that eventually that memory starts saying, hey, hey, you remember me? You need to examine what's going on here, okay? And it's like for Elise, it took what, at least 40 years, right? 20 years, 30 years. How much?
I think you've got your mic muted at least. Let's see if I'm trying to unmute you. No, you'll have to do that.
I got it.
There you
The
go.
memory was there. I was doing everything according to my belief in real about the world, but I had suppressed the facts of what went on so deeply. It was 40 years before I even started to take a peek, and I pretty much went, and didn't want to look again until, I came through and found John in the program here and what, started to slowly take the steps, and they were slow, kind of glacial for me. I'm an old lady, and I came to it not in the, my prime of youth. So it took time. It took time to unravel that, and it was pushing on me. And I think that's one of the reasons why I wound up with John and this group and the book and everything else, was because I was looking for some solutions for problems I didn't even know I had yet. Couldn't even put my finger on it yet until I started to have a language to talk about it.
Okay. Everybody good? You good, Ralph?
I'm good.
All right.
No, I'm not going to be good. That's your problem. It isn't mine.
You're always having fun, John. Come on.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's better than what you guys do.
Yeah, no doubt. So how about we call it for the night? We're going to pick up tomorrow night. We're going to talk about information and communication and why those are really important if you're going to be
just so that we can kind of actually cover what we said we were going to cover about internal and external reality and everything. I know somebody who has a skill, and I want you to consider what I'm going to tell you, because this is a real live, honest to God skill, to be able to talk to you as though they're part of your internal screen.
Mm-hmm.
That this person has a skill level that it allows them to be able to talk to you in such a way that you can't tell whether what you're listening to is your own very own thoughts or it's thoughts from somebody outside. Because whenever your automatic Photoshop repair the external reality screen sees something that doesn't fit, it fixes it automatically. That this person can sit there on your screen and you can't tell that they're there, and neither can your automatic Photoshop machine. Now, I know that's not the only person in the world that can do that. What I wonder is whether or not people have the skills and the skill sets to be able to see which ones can do that, which ones can't, and which ones you got to be careful of, and which ones doesn't make any difference with. I think those are important considerations.
Yeah.
And that's just me, I mean, I'm a crazy motherfucker. So, and I think about crazy shit like that. So, you can't believe anything I'm telling you, Ralph. I'm telling you, you just can't believe it. Don't worry about it, okay? But something to think about if you got a chance tomorrow. Tomorrow's Saturday though. Maybe not. Maybe Monday if it's slow again. Okay.
Okay.
Or during Easter service, that ain't nobody gonna go. Okay, guys, I'm out of here.
Thanks, John and Vanessa and Elise and Terry and Jenny and Paul and all of the various attendees that joined us tonight. Thanks, Ralph, for participating again, and see you all tomorrow.
Good night.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Well,
Good night.
Good night.